Hey everyone, it's Hirsch Wilson, and today is Thursday, December 31st, 2020. It's the end of this year. And normally we celebrate on New Year's, but it doesn't feel very celebratory to me. We've been through a lot of uncertainty and a lot of pain. I feel more as if we're in the middle of a marathon and we're taking a pause, knowing that we have another 13 miles to run. But I also think it's super important to respect the idea of ritual, and right now the ritual of the new year. I grew up as a pretty secular kid, and at 21 I was an arrogant, thinks he knows it all, and I had no time for rituals. I thought rituals were a thing for religious people, and it wasn't until I got into my 30s and I had children and I joined a fire department that I understood how important ritual is. I think rituals are how we construct meaning. And after all, that's what we are as human beings. We're meaning makers. And the rituals we put in the year are how we construct meaning around the year. I think about our ancestors, even as far back as 10,000 years ago, and how they created ritual and meaning. And my example is winter solstice. Can you imagine? I mean, winter solstice is when the sun is at its lowest elevation of the year and the stars come back to their original positions. Can you imagine figuring that out 10,000 years ago without all the science and all the tools we have now? And when you figured it out and thought how significant it was, how could you not make that a sacred time? And it's all about trying to figure out meaning, trying to construct meaning. The Pakistani writer, her name is Dur-e-Azizi Yamani, wrote last week in the New York Times that a life must be led in the present, the eye must be focused on the future, but all meaning comes from the past. So tonight and tomorrow, as we reflect on 2020, what kind of meaning do you take away? What kinds of things are you thinking about? How did 2020 change your thinking? I think this is a deeply personal question. As I've heard a number of times this year, we might be in the same ocean, but we're not in the same boat. The experience of the pandemic, of a recession, of racial inequality in this country has affected us all at a personal level. And it's important for us to kind of reflect and understand what it means to us, how it's changed our thinking, how it's changed our view of ourselves, of how we see optimism, how we see courage, how we see pessimism. For me, as I look back on the meaning of 2020, two things stand out. One is just reality, and the other one gives me immense hope. The first is this: 2020 confirmed to me the idea that we are not in control. We might wish to be in control, we might even think that we're in control, but we're not. Civilization is a veneer, an illusion that covers the fundamental drumbeats of life. That life is unpredictable, that it's uncertain, and there's a touch of chaos. The metaphor I use is that if you think back to March of 2020, when we got our first orders for a lockdown, we all took our calendars and threw them out. Now that was a global experience, but that kind of thing happens on an individual level all the time. If you ask any firefighter, any first responder, they will tell you that stuff happens. And that's kind of the firefighter tattoo, that we know that any given day, stuff happens that can alter your life forever. One of my favorite poets, David Whyte, wrote, "Despite all that you have achieved, life refuses to grant you and will always refuse to grant you immunity from its difficulties." The fight, the goal, is, given all this, to still find joy and fulfillment. And we do this not by buying an expensive car or by making more money than we need. We do it by loving people and being loved. And secondly, we do it by being in service. Now you can ask any first responder, any firefighter, and they'll tell you this is true. You can also ask any grandparent. Next, 2020 has reaffirmed for me that despite the banality, the cruelty, and the selfishness that we've seen, that angels exist. I don't mean the spiritual or religious or mystical kind. I mean, wherever there's suffering and there's trouble, you'll find them. These are the individuals who run towards suffering when others are running away. These are the individuals who take care of the homeless or hold the hand of a dying stranger. Whether by vocation or by instinct, they are the true angels among us. Of course, we've seen examples of this all year long. The people who work in hospitals, the people who are running food banks. My favorite example for me that really struck me was a couple of years ago. On the fire department, we were sitting around in a meeting. It was a winter morning. It was still snowing. And out our window, we saw an SUV spin out of control and plunge into a ditch. Before we could respond, I looked out the window and cars were stopping. People were piling out of their cars and running down the ditch to help. And right at that moment, those people were angels. That impulse to help, I deeply believe, is innate in all of us. It is part of what makes us human. When I put 2020 into a larger context, I understand there will be wars, there will be famines, there will be pandemics, but there will also be angels always running to help. How we view life depends on which one of those we emphasize. I know we have a struggle ahead. The first part of 2021 will be difficult. We're in the middle of a marathon. But spring will come, summer will come, and in the fall, we are going to have a big party, a big celebration. We might be wearing masks, but we're going to do it in person. And I wish the same for you. So be brave, be kind, and fight fires.